You agree to list your truck at no reserve. You chew your fingernails to the bone as you try to answer questions nicely while the bids don't exactly light the world on fire. When the final pathetic virtual gavel falls, your truck sells for only $15,000. You've just agreed to take a $14,000 loss. The big auction platforms have a very dark secret they don't want to tell you. And today, I'm going to shine a very bright and unflattering headlight on this practice. In this video, I'm going to take you through the data that supports the notion no reserve auctions are a bad idea for most classic car sellers and what the exceptions to that rule are. Let's get rolling. My name is Rudy Samsel, and I am the co-founder of GuysWithRides, the trusted dealer-free resource and marketplace for classic and collector car enthusiasts like you and me. I created this video from a position of experience, having bought and sold a variety of cars on several different platforms, including my own. Let's talk about pain. Imagine a world where you own a classic Toyota HiLux pickup. You bought the truck for about $17,000, and then you proceed to put another 12 large into the truck. So all in, you're currently for $29,000. Then you decide, I'm going to sell the truck. Being a realist, you know that what you have into a vehicle is not necessarily what you'll get out of it. You apply on Bring a Trailer, and you do a realistic reserve price of $17,000, rationalizing that's what I paid for the truck. That's what I'd like to get at a minimum. But the so-called experts at Bring a Trailer look at your rock bottom reserve price and scoff. You should list it with no reserve. It'll be a frenzy, a bidding war, they promise, and a guaranteed sale. So you trust these so-called experts. You agree to list your truck at no reserve. You chew your fingernails to the bone as you try to answer questions nicely while the bids don't exactly light the world on fire. When the final pathetic virtual gavel falls, your truck sells for only $15,000. You've just agreed to take a $14,000 loss. It's not a hypothetical. It's the sort of story heard from sellers all the time. Not surprisingly, the seller wrote in the comments after the end of that auction, "Not gonna lie, it kinda hurts." That's an understatement. First off, let's get some basic terminology out of the way. What is a no reserve versus a reserve price auction? In a no reserve auction, there is no minimum price that needs to be met. The highest bid at the end of the auction wins the lot. In a reserve auction, the auction house and the seller agree to a minimum price that no one else knows about. So people bid in a no reserve auction, and when the reserve is met, the auctioneer, or in the case of online auctions, the seller will say the reserve is off. Whether you choose a no reserve auction or a reserve price auction, there are pros and cons to each, and we'll get into that. Now, before we take the concept of no reserve auctions to the woodshed, we first have to understand why it's so alluring. Why do otherwise sensible people willingly wander into this financial minefield? Well, even I have to admit the appeal is potent, and it's built on three brilliant marketing concepts the auction houses push. The first and most powerful is the promise of a guaranteed sale. I'll be the first to admit selling a classic car privately can be a miserable experience. It's a biblical plague of tire kickers, dreamers, lowballers, scammers, as well as people who promise to come and see the vehicle and then ghost you afterwards. The process could take months, and it's utterly draining. Then along comes Bring a Trailer, who grew from humble beginnings, offering 3 auctions a week in 2014, to selling over $1.5 billion in auction offerings 10 years later. For a measly $99 listing fee, they promise your car will be gone in 7 days. That certainty is a powerful drug. If you happen to be in the process of a move, or you just need to liquidate some assets, or you just can't stomach one more "is it still available" question on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, A guaranteed sale feels like salvation. The second pillar the big auction sites promise you is the myth of bidding frenzy. The sales pitch is that no reserve auctions create a tornado of excitement. The notion is that when bidders know a car will sell, lowballers will get in early in the auction and put a bid in, hoping for a flicker of ownership. Then more bidders pile on when they realize the car is going to sell no matter what. And kaboom, a bidding war erupts in the last 2 minutes, driving the price to the stratosphere. Unfortunately, they're selling you the fantasy of a lottery ticket by trying to convince you that no reserve auctions are the only way to go. The third pillar is how simple a no reserve auction looks on the surface. You upload some photos, answer a few questions, pay the seller's fee, and you let the great wisdom of the market do its thing. There's simplicity in knowing that there's no haggling with the auction specialist about what your reserve price should be. And for some, there's a fear that if the car does not sell at or above their reserve price, they'll have to go through the process all over again. The promise of a no reserve auction is that you just sit back, watch the bidding fireworks, and it's the path of least resistance. The problem is, this is a carefully crafted piece of marketing that serves the big auction's interests far, far more than yours. The moment you look at the facts, the illusion shatters and you see the trap. Let's get into the cold, hard reality and the data behind it. Here are the 3 reasons listing a classic car at no reserve is one of the worst gambles in the motoring world. Reason number 1, auction houses are not your friends. Their incentives are not your incentives. Think of gambling in Vegas. There's an old adage, the house always wins. The big auction houses now is that many have been bought up by private equity or other companies, and they expect a return on their investment. This has led to the natural progression of them pushing no reserve auctions to keep their sell-through rate high. This is the most important thing to get your head around. It's a common myth that big auction houses will get the most money for your car. That couldn't be further from the truth. They are looking at sell-through rate. How many cars did we offer versus how many we actually sold? Their business is built on volume. Let's look at the numbers. Every month, Bring a Trailer boasts a very high overall sell-through rate. However, the data tells a different story. Every month, Bring Your Trailer sends out their monthly status report, boasting that they have a very high sell-through rate, often in the high 70s or currently low 80s. And that's a fantastic statistic to wave in front of inexperienced sellers. That impressive figure is propped up by an ever-increasing amount of no-reserve auctions, which by definition are a guaranteed sale and 100% no reserve. However, when you strip out no reserve auctions with Bring a Trailer, the sell-through rate drops to the high 40s. In other words, if Bring a Trailer agrees to list your car with a reserve price, your car has only a 50-50 shot of actually meeting or exceeding its reserve price at the end of its 7-day auction. Now let's follow the money of a typical auction on Bring a Trailer. As a seller, you pay a flat $99 fee. The buyer, however, pays a 5% premium directly to Bring a Trailer and then owes the seller whatever the final hammer amount was. And that's capped at $7,500 currently. For Bring a Trailer, the difference between your car selling for $50,000 or $60,000 isn't that dramatic. A $10,000 delta for you is only a $500 difference for them. Whether you like it or not, your individual heartache winds up being rounding error for some sites as big as Bring a Trailer. They know a realistic reserve on a classic car with a small audience may not make the reserve price. Sites like Bring a Trailer would rather see your car sell for a song than for it to fail to sell at a fair price. Their interests are not just different than yours, they're diametrically opposed. Reason number 2 is you are completely exposed to the whims of the market, whether it be the current macro conditions or even the day and time your auction ends. A no-reserve auction is like juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle. You are completely at the mercy of chance. A variety of things completely out of your control can torpedo your auction. What if the stock market has a bad week? What if a cleaner example of your exact car is listed at the same time? What if it's a holiday weekend and everybody's at the beach? What if your auction ends on a Friday afternoon when everybody else is thinking about their weekend plans? With no reserve auction, you just have to lie there and take the financial beating. And then there's the comment section, the infamous peanut gallery, especially on Bring a Trailer. A good crowd can add value. A bad one can be a toxic swamp. A few influential keyboard warriors with a grudge can poison the well, raising doubts about the car or picking apart minor flaws. The seller becomes a helpless bystander watching people with no financial interest in the car set your virtual money on fire. You see the fallout of this all over the internet. There are forums filled with stories of sellers who do not go through with the deal and ultimately getting permanently banned from the platforms. Personally, I've had nearly a dozen former sellers confide in me that they actually paid the buyer's premium and by bidding on their own car or having a friend do it, which is against the terms and conditions of all auction sites, including mine. But they do this under the notion of they would rather buy the car back than to quote unquote give it away. This isn't a freak accident. It's what happens when you strip the seller of all control by forcing them to agree to a no reserve auction. Reason number 3, the notion that no reserve auctions create a bidding frenzy. This is the central lie of the whole no reserve fantasy. Yes, we've all seen the unicorn cars, from low mileage Concours quality Porsches to ubiquitous delivery mile Chevrolet Chevettes, where no reserve listings trigger bidding wars that shoot to the moon. These are the sales the auction sites like to put in their marketing emails. But that's classic survivorship bias. You're only seeing the handful of jackpot winners, not the silent majority of crushing disappointments. For every classic car that gets into a bidding frenzy, there are countless others that just don't. You may only have 1 or 2 interested bidders. If one of them has a bad day, there is no frenzy, there is no bidding war, there is just an awkward silence, followed by a final price that leaves you sick to your stomach. And unfortunately, as I've said before, these are often the exact cars the platforms push to no reserve because they know the audience is small and a high reserve won't be met. So they make the seller carry all the risk. It's predatory. They use their massive platform as leverage to force sellers into the riskiest position possible, all in an effort to protect their sell-through rate. If you're finding this content valuable and you want more information about navigating the shark-infested waters of online car sales, then do the right thing and at a minimum, press the like button. And if you haven't done so, I also encourage you to consider subscribing. Pressing the subscribe button costs you nothing, but doing so keeps me motivated to provide data-driven videos such as this one to give you the knowledge that the big auction houses don't want you to know. So let's get into the data a little bit more. In my professional career, I have extensive experience with big data analytics. I took it upon myself to analyze Bring a Trailer's most recent no reserve results using a combination of Bring a Trailer's readily available data as well as the website classic.com. I downloaded 1 week's worth of no reserve auctions from Bring a Trailer's site for the 7-day period from July 29th through August 4th, 2025. I wanted to do at least a 7-day period to see if there was one day that particularly stood out from the others. After stripping out all of the non-car auctions they have on there, whether it's signage, motorcycles, or other what have you, I compared each vehicle's no reserve hammer price against the average value currently posted on Classic.com for that particular car. For many popular cars offered on Bring a Trailer, Classic.com offers what that website refers to as the Classic.com Market Benchmark, or CMB for short. That's a calculated average based on their proprietary algorithm. For less common vehicles without a CMB on Classic.com, I relied on year-to-date sales posted on that site for the exact model year only. Results with less than 3 data points year-to-date in 2025 were also stripped from the analysis. So with some 350 no reserve listings during that 1 week period, My net data set was 280 records. That 1 week of no reserve data solidifies why no reserve auctions are a high risk gamble. First, timing is everything, and I mean everything. In one example, a 1989 Mercedes 560 SL sold for $23,900, which is $7,100 below its CMB value of nearly $31,000. That's the equivalent of selling a luxury yacht for the price of a dinghy. But in the same week, a 1989 Toyota 4Runner hit nearly $25,000, or about $7,000 higher than its average value of $18,000. The difference? It's pure luck. Who's online, what day your auction ends, and who's got cash burning a hole in their pocket. Second, market values seem to be more like horoscopes than science. My data showed no reserve listings swinging from 60% below the average market value to achieving 50% above it. In one example, a 2016 Audi A4 sold for $6,400 against a $23,000 market price, and nearly $17,000 faceplant. But a 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28, it cruised to 92.5, about 27,000 over market, more than likely because it had excellent presentation, excellent documentation. Again, the dirty little secret about no reserve auctions on Bring a Trailer. They get their commission whether your car sells for a million or the price of a Happy Meal. Again, they're like the house in Las Vegas. The house always wins. One of the eye-openers of analyzing just the no reserve auction data on Bring a Trailer for that week into the cars that are not offered. You don't see a lot of pre-1960s cars offered at no reserve on Bring a Trailer. You don't see many muscle cars or older vintage Corvettes offered at no reserve. Now, why is that? I bet they get a lot of inquiries. Last data I looked at, they get between 200 and 300 inquiries a day from people. But then you see the conversations going back and forth. Probably their auction specialists are saying, why don't you list it at no reserve? But baby boomers in particular are much more risk averse, and they do not want to risk offering their car at no reserve, and rightfully so. Probably the reason for that mix is, and to Bring a Trailer's credit, they have the data to show if they try to offer a car with a fair market value reserve, particularly when you get above $50,000, the pool of bidder dries up quickly. And that's why you're just not seeing many of those cars offered, whether it be no reserve or reserve. So we've been talking mainly about how sellers get screwed with no reserve. But let's talk about the buyer's perspective. Buyers have this notion that watching the no reserve auctions on site like Bring a Trailer is going to be an easy peasy thing, and they'll just swoop in and get a deal. Let's pump the brakes on that. The data says it's not that easy. No reserve does not mean cheap. You have to remember something about Bring a Trailer. And all of the other auction sites, you're not on a level playing field. You're bidding against dealers oftentimes. Dealers who are looking for deals on inventory so they can keep their margin up when they sell the car at retail. So no reserve does not necessarily mean cheap. At the other end of the spectrum, this 1999 Acura NSXT sold for $170,000, about nearly $60,000 over its $110,000 market value. That's not a deal. That's someone caught in a bidding war, probably shouting, "I must have it," letting what's known as the endowment effect get to them. Meanwhile, their wallet wept the whole way. More than likely because if they go to try to sell that car 1 or 2 years down the road, they will not get what they paid for. Highly unlikely. Here's the buyer's catch-22 in a no-reserve auction. You're up against folks who think they're getting a guaranteed sale. That only serves to jack up the competition. This 1995 Ford Bronco that recently sold for $85,000 is a great example. Somebody probably saw it as their ticket to 1990s cool and overbid like they were buying a time machine. But the smart buyers, they hunt the wallflowers on the site. The aforementioned Audi A4 is a great example. It's below the market value because it was a steal that wasn't sexy for the typical crowd. Timing's a big deal for buyers too. My data shows that weekend afternoons tend to have hotter bidding. On Saturday, August 1st, for example, 59% of the no reserve cars that day sold at or above their CMB price. Conversely, weekday afternoons only saw 40% of no reserve auctions selling at or above their CMB. And the other 60% of no reserve auctions offered on the weekdays sold at an average of nearly $3,300 below their CMB. No reserve auctions are like shopping at a garage sale. Get there before everyone else, and you might snag a gem. Successful reserve auctions in my data, whether it's on my site or the analysis I do on my competitors, continues to prove that reserve prices set at or just below market value based on the condition tend to see a sale happen. The ones that flopped, more often than not, it's sellers hoping for Ferrari money for their Fiat. So why would you go reserve? Well, it's control. You're not tossing your car into the no reserve mosh pit hoping for a miracle. Sure, BAT pushes no reserve because it's a guaranteed sale and a guaranteed commission for them. But as a seller, you're not running a charity. Stick to wanting a reserve like you use a seatbelt. It might not be sexy, but it'll save you from a crash. So what's the alternative? Especially if you're under the pressure of the no reserve auction, bring a trailer. How do you sell your car without risking financial annihilation? The answer is to reject their script and take back control. Early in this video, I showed a picture of a Plymouth Prowler with only 51 miles that I offered on behalf of the seller on Bring a Trailer. The seller was adamant about the reserve price, and right away, Bring a Trailer wanted to make the reserve price $4,000 less than that. After first asking us, would we like to try no reserve, I came back and said no. I stayed firm. And more importantly, I used their own data against them. Specifically, I pulled out 3 or 4 data points where I showed them recent sales that supported wanting a firm $39,000 reserve price on the car. After several days going back and forth, they came back with their make whole policy. If the car met $36,000 threshold, they would make the seller whole on the difference. And to Bring a Trailer's credit, after both the seller and buyer confirmed that the sale had gone through and the money had changed hands and the car was delivered to the buyer, they cut a check within a week after that to make the difference. The lesson learned there is you must always fight for a reserve price. The reserve is not your dream price. It's not what you hope to get. The reserve is your ejector seat. It is your walk-away price. It's the number that lets you sleep at night, knowing that no matter what happens, you will not be forced to sell your pride and joy for a penny less. What do you do when a platform such as Bring a Trailer rejects your reserve price? Because candidly, they often will, especially if you're being unrealistic. Never be pressured into a no reserve you're not comfortable with and hope for the best. That's the smart move. That's the professional move. You walk away. If something's meant to be, it will be. Bring a Trailer may be the Goliath in the industry, but they're not the only game in town. If you get rejected by them because you were not comfortable taking a no reserve auction, then come to a David, GuysWithRides. I will provide a complimentary market analysis, a realistic one, and I will list the car for free, regardless of whether it sells or not. Remember, walking away isn't defeat. It's a business decision. It's choosing to protect your asset over the ego of being on the biggest site in town. Got to remember, sometimes the best deal is the one you don't make. Are there any situations where a no reserve auction makes sense? I have to admit, yes, but they are incredibly specific. First is pure liquidation. I've had a number of customers where they've inherited a car, they're not into classic cars, and they want to close the estate, get rid of it as quickly as possible. Most recently, that was a 1962 Thunderbird located here on the other side of town, and the daughters of the deceased wanted to find a good home for the car as they were selling their father's house and needed to move the car quickly. I've had other situations. That's usually the only time I recommend no reserve auctions on my site. You're more interested in finding a good home for the car as quickly as possible and knowing it will sell quickly. And I've been successful at that. Those are situations where speed is your goal, not maximum value. The other cars that tend to do well at no reserve are serious project cars in a state of non-running condition or very low value cars that don't come up often for auction. If you're selling something that's only worth a few $1,000s, the financial risk is obviously much smaller. For example, the hassle of a no sale might outweigh the risk of selling it for $1,500 versus $2,500. There are exceptions to the rule, and it depends on the model and the current timing. As I shoot this video, the three kinds of cars I see that tend to do well at no reserves include the following: 1990s trucks and SUVs. That's a hot market right now, led by first and now second generation Ford Broncos, Chevy Blazers, and the like. If you have a low mileage, excellent condition example in this, there is a pool of buyers out there willing to pay for high quality. Classic.com reports there's booming demand for 90s trucks and SUVs due to their rugged appeal and cultural significance, making them ideal for no reserve auctions that do spark bidding wars. Based on my analysis, these vehicles right now tend to attract competitive bidding as buyers chase well-preserved examples. Another exception tends to be air-cooled and very rare Porsche models. Porsche's premium brand status and enthusiast following drive competitive bidding. Porsche's consistent overperformance, in fact, 58% over the CMB in my analysis, makes no reserve a fairly safe bet for low-mileage, Concours quality examples, as bidders are more likely to push prices up. However, current Porsche high tide does not lift all of the boats under its brand umbrella, especially the four-door and SUV variants. The third exception tends to be specific high-demand models with unique stories. Cars with unusual stories, extremely low-mileage survivor-quality cars, or rare options can exceed expectations in no-reserve auctions. In these situations, my data does tend to show that they can exceed the CMB. So in closing, is the rise of no-reserve auctions good or bad? Well, looking at the incentives, the data, and the real-world stories of financial pain, the conclusion is obvious. For most people selling a valuable classic or collector car, it is a demonstrably bad trend. So don't let the slick marketing push you into a decision you might regret. The most important number in an auction isn't the final bid. It's the reserve price you set to protect yourself. Never ever agree to a no-reserve auction unless you're 100% prepared to watch your car sell for a pittance and be okay with it. Protect your investment, maintain control, and don't let anyone convince you to gamble with your pride and joy. Remember, Guys with Rides is the only dealer-free website for classic and car enthusiasts, and we're here to help you not only find a car at the right price, but to sell your classic at a price you'll be comfortable with. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever sold a car at no reserve? What happened? Was it a dream come true or an absolute disaster? Please tell me your story in the comments below. I will read and comment on all of them, and your experience could save someone from making a very expensive mistake. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, get out there and drive, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching this video. Please press the like and subscribe button, comment below, and be sure to check out our other videos on this subject, as well as all the great content on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can call me at the number listed below, or be sure to check out our main website, GuysWithRides.com.